Acrylic paint is available in three basic consistencies. There are acrylic inks, soft body acrylics, and heavy body acrylics. In this video, I'll show you the differences between them and explain which painting techniques each one is best suited for. Viscosity refers to how thick or thin an acrylic paint is. In the professional line, there's a lot of options, and these are the acrylic inks that I like to use. Golden's version is called High Flow. They do have like an agitator in there, and that's because the pigment tends to settle on the bottom and that will agitate it. Liquitex has acrylic ink, and it's pretty similar to the High Flow acrylics. I haven't really used these too much, but I think they'd work good on paper. These are Dr. P.H. Martin's, and they're acrylic inks. They list them as being light, fast, archival, waterproof, acid-free, non-toxic. I'll go ahead and make a couple swatches on this acrylic paper. This is the ultramarine blue from Golden's High Flow acrylics. I'll squirt out a little bit on the paper and then add some water to it. And then I'll add a little bit of the quinacridone magenta and mix a purple. So you can see you get like nice watercolor effects with these inks. These are the acrylic inks from Liquitex. There's Naphthol Crimson and Yellow Medium Azo. It's similar in consistency to the High Flow acrylic. And I'll just spread it out here, and then maybe I'll add the red in the corner like I did on the other one. Here are two colors from Dr. P.H. Martin's. There's True Blue and Grass Green. They don't really use the typical color names that you find in other acrylics, but I imagine if you look up these pigment codes on the back, you can figure out what these are. These are pretty intense. And then I'll put some of this green on here, and then just sort of let them flow together and mix on the paper. So can you see how it's easier to get like a watercolor effect with this type of acrylic paint? Fluid acrylics and soft body are pretty much the same thing. They have the consistency of something like heavy cream, maybe a little bit thicker. Liquitex calls it soft body, and Golden refers to it as fluid acrylics. There's really no standard for this. And Liquitex now has the basics in the fluid viscosity, which is a nice addition. I'll paint some swatches on here like I did with the acrylic inks, and we'll compare how thick they are. I'll start with the Golden fluid acrylics, phthalo blue, red shade, and quinacridone magenta. It's similar to the consistency of the craft paint. It's not as thick as something like the heavy body, but it's definitely not like an ink either. So I'll just brush some of this out. It's much easier to level this out compared to like a heavy body acrylic. And I find it's good for painting like sharp edges like this here, whereas the heavy body paint sort of creates like a dry brushing effect because it's so thick. I'll add a little bit of the magenta to it. Here's a little bit of white just so we can see the purple. So if you paint in like solid flat areas of color, this paint would work really well. Here's the soft body line of acrylics. I'll use the Yellow Medium Azo and a Naphthol Red Light. It has about the same thickness as the Golden fluid acrylics. And I'll start working in some of this red. You'll notice how the acrylic ink just sort of flows into the other areas, but when the paint gets thicker, you have to blend it yourself. I'm not trying to get like a super smooth blend here. I'm just trying to show the consistency of these paints. The fluid version of Liquitex Basics come in these bottles. I'll squirt some out on here. And I think I'll add white to this, just so it doesn't get so dark on me. So these are pretty smooth, and they're easy to spread out. Mix some white in there. So there's the basics version of fluid acrylics. So if you want to use fluid acrylics and you want a cheaper paint, you could try the Liquitex Basics fluid acrylics. Here's something I'd like to point out about coverage and the different types of paints. This is from the Liquitex acrylic book. It's outdated, but I still have a PDF of it. And they mentioned the soft body professional acrylics cover 400 square feet per gallon, whereas the heavy body professional acrylics only covers 130 square feet per gallon. This is on their section on mural painting, just because a mural artist, you're going to be concerned about how much paint you're going through. The point I'm getting to is the soft body acrylics cover 308% more square footage than the heavy body acrylics. So if you don't care about thick impasto, like thick brush strokes, and you're okay with painting in a thinner layer, you can get 3 times as much coverage out of the soft body acrylics because it's going down so thin. It's just something to keep in mind, and I would imagine it's even better when you use acrylic inks because you're adding water to it and it's going on in a very thin layer. Here's the Liquitex heavy body acrylics. These are the thicker acrylic paints. This is a simple intro kit, and I'll just mix up some phthalo blue with white to give you an idea how thick this is. It's similar to the basics acrylics, but I would say it's a bit thicker. So there's the phthalo blue, and here's some white. You see how that keeps a peak, whereas like the fluid acrylic would just sort of smooth right out. And that's the main difference, is the body of the paint. It's much thicker. So you can use this for impasto painting, where you paint in thick layers and it shows the palette knife textures. See how that holds those bristle marks like that when I just lift it up? This is supposed to mimic like oil paint, where you can have palette knife marks or bristle marks in here like that. You can also use it in a thin layer, like if you wanted flat areas of color, you can do that, but it's much thicker. It feels harder to push around than the soft body paints. So this is something to consider based on the style you want to paint in. And I'll quickly do the golden and then the basics, just to give you an idea what those look like. They're very similar to this though. Here's a 12 color set from Golden. These are the heavy body acrylics. Here's a close up. You get similar peaks from that too. This is magenta, and you can make a red from that by mixing yellow in there. See how that turns kind of reddish? That's something I cover in my color mixing course. So you can get magenta, red, and then it turns into more of an orange when you add more yellow to it. So I'll just leave it like this. I'll leave some of that brushwork in the corner here, and then I'll do the Liquitex basics. So finally, here are the Liquitex basics. It's cad yellow, light hue, and primary red. And sometimes the paint dries on the top, but these plastic tops, the paint doesn't stick to it. You just peel it right off. These have a thick texture too. So you see how that tipped over when I picked it up? I don't think the regular heavy body would do that as much, but it's still a pretty thick paint compared to the fluid acrylics. Just brush this out. And I think I might just leave it that thick just to show that you can create textures with this paint. You can build up pretty much similar textures with all these heavy body acrylics. I just left a little bit more on the basics one. This video was adapted from my acrylic painting supplies course, which I'm currently making available for free. If you'd like a more complete overview of acrylic paints, brushes, surfaces, palettes, and other materials, I'll put a link to the course in the description below. Thanks for watching.